I was sitting in my room when I received a call from my grandmother. She told me she had just learned about the chaos at my parents' wedding. My family was filled with drama, and I had been excluded from everything. She insisted I come stay with her and my uncle for a while, offering to help me with rent and an allowance to move out. I was grateful for her generosity and expressed my appreciation, but I also shared how this experience had opened my eyes. I realized how privileged I had been all my life. Despite their flaws, my parents had financially pampered me. I attended private school, had a sizable monthly allowance, and had my own card for years without any objections to my spending. After reading stories online, I understood how fortunate I had been and how my dependency on them left me vulnerable to losing everything. I craved independence, not just from my parents, but from everyone. Even though my grandmother insisted on helping me until I was self-sufficient, I planned to find a job and learn to stand on my own 2 feet. After some downtime at the hotel, we took a cab to my house. My parents were shocked to see my grandmother and uncle with me. Before they could say anything, my grandmother urged me to pack my essentials while she spoke to my parents. As I rushed upstairs, I could hear my grandmother confronting them about how they had treated me. Initially, my parents attempted to defend themselves, but soon fell silent. When I returned downstairs with 2 suitcases and my backpack, the atmosphere was tense. My father looked furious while my mother sobbed, reaching out to me with apologies. I coldly told her to save it, and my dad remarked that I didn't have to be rude, only for my uncle and grandmother to tell him to be quiet. I stepped outside to wait for the cab, and my grandmother reassured me that I wouldn't have to return to them. She had already confirmed that my college tuition was secure, and that my parents planned to throw me an extravagant birthday party to make amends, even offering to buy me a car as an apology. My grandmother dismissed these gestures as insincere attempts to save face. The tipping point for my mother seemed to be when my grandmother mentioned that I had even questioned my paternity. My grandmother then reminded her that they had continually excluded me from family events since childhood. She assured me she would ensure my school payments were made unless I chose to sever ties completely, in which case she would help until I could support myself. I reluctantly agreed, feeling guilty for placing that burden on her, but I truly wanted nothing from my parents anymore. The next day, my grandmother, my friend, and her parents took me to view a studio where we were considering moving. Upon arrival, my grandmother immediately declared it unacceptable. I had seen photos of the place, which appeared small and dirty, but now I noticed the water damage and mold in the bathroom and kitchenette. Although I was aware of these issues, I thought I could manage for a while. However, what truly made us rethink was the fact that the studio was street level in a dangerous neighborhood, with bullet holes in the walls, a detail my friend's dad pointed out. My grandmother and her parents quickly decided to find us a better apartment and help cover the costs. My friend and I wanted independence, but realized that, with our likely minimum wage jobs in such a high-demand area, finding a suitable place on our own would be difficult. The plan was to search for a 2-bedroom apartment where we would pay what we had initially planned for the studio, with our families covering the difference. I felt a bit spoiled for relying on my grandmother's help, but after seeing the studio, I was genuinely grateful for their support. My friend's parents, aware of my situation, offered for me to stay with them until we found a suitable apartment. I was incredibly thankful for their kindness, especially since my grandmother would soon be returning home. As I started moving some of my belongings from my parents' house, I encountered my mother, who was still crying and apologizing. Even my father had expressed remorse, but I kept my distance, feeling justified in my decision to maintain boundaries. When my sister called to berate me for my actions, I hung up and blocked her. I considered blocking my brother as well until I received a heartfelt message from him. He apologized profusely for his past behavior and admitted to realizing how poorly our parents treated me. Although I appreciated his sincerity, I felt I needed space and wasn't ready to accept his apology just yet. I had also scheduled an appointment with a therapist specializing in neglected teens, funded by my grandmother, which made me eager to find a job to alleviate any burden on her. Despite her reassurances that she was happy to help, I wanted to contribute to my own life. That's where I stand right now. I might not update again until I start classes or move into the apartment, but for now, I'm focusing on enjoying my time with my grandmother and uncle, working through my feelings of guilt and depression. I want to express my gratitude to this community for being so supportive and for sharing their stories of overcoming similar struggles. Your encouragement has made me feel less alone and more determined to forge my own path. Thank you for everything. Your kindness means more than words can express.